Hi.
Hello. Okay, so we are live now, coming to you from the University of Texas at Tyler. My name is Holly Collier, and I'm very excited to have David Scott from the Department of Criminal Justice with us today. He's going to be talking about excelling student learning experiences with guest experts. We do have a Today's Meet. It's the back-end channel, so if you have questions, you can use that link to post any comments or questions. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to David and let him start sharing his wisdom with you.
Good morning. I hope you guys are doing okay. I don't know about wisdom. That's putting a lot on me, Holly, but thanks. My name is Dr. David Scott. I am a assistant professor here at the University of Texas at Tyler. I've been here full-time. This is my first year. And we have been working on programs like this for about a year now, since I've been here. And this semester, I was teaching our senior level criminal investigations course. And during my prep for the course over the Christmas holidays, I was thinking of ways to basically make this class more interactive and more relevant to my graduating seniors. I had about 28 in one site, and then I had about 3 others at a remote site where we would use Zoom for them to Zoom in. So I had about 30 students in all for this semester for this project. So what we started doing on day one was I asked them a very simple question, show of hands, how many were graduating, and about half the class went up, and I think there was one in Longview. And I said, okay, what are your job prospects? Have you been interviewing? Do you have a resume? And immediately all the hands except for 1 or 2 actually went down and 2 stayed up. And this was kind of my aha moment, like, okay, we have an opportunity here to generate some learning firsthand inside this course. So what I started to do was poll my students and ask them, what do you want to do? Why are you getting this degree? What are your future plans? What steps are you taking to secure a career after graduation? And a lot of them, if I could get inside their brains, I think they actually had this belief that as soon as they walked across the stage, got their diploma, that there was going to be an FBI badge or a CIA badge or a DEA badge waiting for them and an agent to take them to Quantico and start training them. And that couldn't be farthest from the truth. So what I'm going to do this morning is I created a presentation to show you what I did this semester. And at any time we have questions, I have to work the share screen back and forth. And I'm kind of new to the Google YouTube thing. So Holly's on standby to walk me through it if I have a silly moment or something. So I'm going to get the share screen here. Clicking on it. There we go. I'm going to share my desktop. You can tell Holly's trained me well. Whoa, where'd you go? Holly.
Yes.
I'm seeing like 6,000 screens here, but okay. Can you guys see the screen?
Yes.
All right, good. Let me play this for you guys. Okay, so I created this presentation called The Benefits to Inviting Guest Speakers into Your Classroom. And a lot of people love having people come in. Some people don't. But I think in terms of having seniors, I wanted to find people that were basically in their career field, that were looking for jobs, trying to get networking going, and try to understand what they need besides just having a diploma to get into their field of choice, and seeing what's out there on the market right now. So again, my name's Dr. Scott. I love using this little tab here. It's fun. I got that for free off Media Presenter. Okay, so this presentation shared to you from my personal experience for my criminal investigations course this semester at UT. We wrap things up next week, but just about every week at the end of the week, I had somebody from the criminal justice field come in and talk to my students. What I tried to do was weave my guest speakers into that course objective or the topic I was talking about that in each particular week. All right, so here we go. So what brought this about? Again, earlier, as I mentioned in my introduction, that more than half my students in class are graduating students and had no idea what was going on in their degree field. They simply thought that, again, if they had a degree, that they were going to graduate and immediately land into a, a six-figure job. They were going to become FBI agents. They were going to become CSI agents. They were going to become police officers simply because they sat in a chair for 4 years and got decent grades and got out of here. And I had to explain to them, no, that gets you into the lobby of the career hotel, but you're nowhere near the penthouse yet. So we kind of started breaking things down a little bit. When I first asked them what they wanted to do, this is what all my students envisioned what their careers were going to be. Just like CSI, that, crime scenes are solved in an hour, and data and DNA and blood sample results come back immediately, and, we have everything wrapped up before the next commercial. Hawaii Five-0, this is a show that I really, really despise, and if you like this show, I mean no disrespect or offense, but I told them that these guys here, they spent an hour shooting everyone on the island of Hawaii or the state of Hawaii, and never once do they get put on leave. You don't see them doing paperwork. You don't see them, doing the real stuff of police work and investigations. The bottom one was another one. I actually, the name just escaped me, but one of my students told me about it. I think it was like The Rookie Show, or I forget the name of the show, but the guy on the left there, he's starring in Gotham now. The other guy's on Walking Dead, so that's why I saw it and grabbed it. But this is what my adrenaline junkies thought, the job was like. You're going to be kicking indoors all the time, guns blazing, no backup, having fun. And then, of course, everyone's favorite show is NCIS, where, everything comes together, and they're, federal agents, and they work 8-to-5 jobs, and they all get designer suits and all that. So a lot of this was what I call Hollywood-based information. And it's fun to watch. I had to explain to them, after a day or two, this is Hollywood. These guys are actors. The guns aren't loaded. There's a lot of stuff that, if they did in real life, that you'd probably lose your job or end up in federal court. And we kind of started discussing that. So what I had to give my students was a reality check. All right. We had to talk about what really goes on in law enforcement and what's really going on when you're going to be a federal agent and becoming a police officer, probation officer, and so forth. So I had to think about who I wanted to invite. I had 12 weeks to play with, arguably 12 to 15 instructors. And I had to remember that it was a criminal investigations course. So I asked my students one question. I had to write it down. What do you want to do after graduation? What is your dream job? What are you aspiring for? Tell me your game plan. And a lot of them didn't have one. So we had to spend a couple minutes on that. And basically my goal was to get them the job, or help them get on the path to get their job. So we started talking. And that's the only CSI badge I could find. I don't think there's a I guess there is a Las Vegas CSI division. But some of them wanted to be going to forensics. They wanted to work the blood, work in the lab. They wanted to, work with the dead body investigations. They wanted to work, all the cool stuff they see on TV. So they needed to get a background in forensics. And I did some digging and brought in a forensics guy, which I'll show you in just a minute. I had a couple that wanted to be an ATF agent, alcohol, tobacco, and firearms with the Homeland Security. I had several students in my class that was interested in the Texas Department of Public Safety, becoming troopers and then aspiring to become Texas Rangers. And for those of you that don't know, my background before I came to UT Tyler is I was a 13-year police sergeant with the city of Longview in Gregg County, and I worked a lot with these agencies. So I had a lot to bring to the table because I worked with DPS and the federal agents, so I was able to call some people. But a lot of these guys, were interested in becoming highway patrolmen and then working their way into investigations. So we talked about that a little bit. Of course, all of them want to be FBI agents. So fortunately, I had a friend from the FBI that was just down the street, and he came in actually last week. He was my last speaker for the semester, and discussed what's going on with the FBI, and I'll get more to that in just a few minutes. Had a couple that was interested in being DEA agents, working for drug enforcement, working dope and narcotics. I had three that were actually interested in becoming game wardens for the state of Texas. So I brought some game wardens in. I had several that wanted to just stay local, get some experience. So we had myself from Longview Police, a former detective, come in. We had the recruiting sergeant come in from the city of Tyler. We had some that wanted to be forensic interviewers with children. So we got involved with the Child's Advocacy Center in the bottom right in Smith County, and that was a huge success story. So I'm excited to talk about that. And then I had two students that were seniors, and one had just finished interning for Child Protective Services. So I was able to bring in a special investigator from Child Protective Services and talk about his job and what they're looking for in terms of applicants. So we'll get started. Oh yeah, sorry. I had a couple that were going to stick around for graduate school, one that was looking at law school. I had two that were going to get their nursing program, go into the nursing program after they got their undergrad, and they wanted to become sexual assault nurse examiners, SANE nurses that work with sexual assault victims. So a friend of mine, Nanette Pereiras, who's over the SANE program at Good Shepherd Hospital in Longview, she came in. And then I had a couple that were actually interviewing right now for to join the Smith County Sheriff's Department here in Tyler, Smith County. So we had a lot going on in the class, which was really cool. Okay, so the goal was to coordinate relevant guest speakers, and these were the topics we were hitting this semester. We had introduction to investigations. We had crime scene. We had property crimes, person crimes. We were talking, this is the topics we covered each week. Crimes against children, sexual assault related crimes. We just wrapped up cyber crimes last week. We had narcotics investigations and terrorism investigations. So we had a lot going on, a lot of different topics. So my theory was each week bring in a relevant speaker, whether they were state or federal, that could tie in not only the course objectives for that week, but have someone that's actually working in the field and have them go out and say, look, this is how you get the job. This is what to expect with the job. And, you know, this is what we're looking for currently as of today with our applicants coming right out of college. And that was kind of like the foundation I was building on with bringing in these guest speakers. So the first speaker I brought was former crime scene detective Dan Rigstad. He and I worked together for 13 years. He just retired. He's now a full-time instructor at the East Texas Police Academy. He basically was our CSI guy for the city of Longview. That's me on the right there. But he came in and did a great job. He actually is a current UT Tyler student. He's working on getting his bachelor's degree right now with us. So it was really good to bring a couple of these speakers were actually former or current UT Tyler students, to bring them into the classroom and say, hey, you know, 2 or 3 years ago, I sat in those chairs. I had Dr. Scott. I had all these classes. But this is what I did after graduation or before graduation to get this job, and to show some relevance to what they were doing. During Dan's presentation, he actually talked about death investigations and crime scene integrity. And what he did was he worked a presentation of a double murder suicide that he and I actually both worked on. So we were able to work on tandem. It was a 2009 case. And we showed the crime scene photos of what we did, why we did what we did. We explained preserving the integrity of the crime scene, what actually goes into a death investigation, not the stuff you see on CSI and NCIS and NYPD Blue, but why we're the steps we take, getting a warrant, you know, taking pictures, going to autopsy, presenting the case for grand jury if the guy, you know, hadn't killed himself. And I think during the presentation, everyone was just so engrossed with the crime scene. But what was really great was after we finished, I think we ended up going over class 15 minutes with all the questions. So we were starting to see the level of engagement and everything we'd been talking about with death investigations that week with Detective Rigstad and myself. So this was my first one to try for the semester. It worked out great, so I was very excited to have Dan in. The following week, I found Trooper Michael Blackwell. This guy here, a former student of mine, great guy. He and I worked together in Great County. He was a trooper just as I was getting out of Longview Police Department. But he started with the undergrad in criminal justice here at UT, then got into the DPS Academy, graduated, did very well in the academy. And I brought him in to talk about narcotics interdiction, becoming a trooper, and we talked about motor vehicle searches, search and seizures, stuff like that. But Mike was one of those guys. He is so outgoing. He had the class in stitches, literally laughing with all the silly stories he had on traffic stops, narcotics investigations, some stuff that he learned as a trooper. And then I give each of my speakers the full hour. And what Michael did was he started from the time he was about to graduate. He discussed the interview process, the application process, what he had to do to get to the academy. And then he talked about what he did for 19 weeks at the academy, you know, as far as learning the laws of the Texas Commission on Law Enforcement, becoming a peace officer, traffic investigations, narcotics interdiction. You know, then he talked about where he was stationed first and how he got back to Great County. He talked about Operation Lone Star, which is where new troopers have to go and spend about a year down at the border working with ATF, FBI, DEA, and Border Patrol, and some of the experiences he gained from them. I think after he left, I had 5 students actually apply for DPS, and right now they're in their background investigations and awaiting to figure out if they're going to go to the July, August, or December academy. That was really significant, and I think it was a great way to bring in a good presenter. Next, I brought in Nikki Kaysen. She's an officer with with Longview Police Department. Nikki is a current student at UT. She's studying in Longview, so she televises or Zooms in each week for her classes because she's got to work. Bajaris is the name of her canine, but we were talking about canine officers and more narcotics investigations and using the canine as a tool. And to be honest, I had the dog walk around the room and, sniff the students, sniff the backpacks. And fortunately, the dog didn't alert on anything, which was a good day for me, because I think that would be an automatic F for the students. But Nikki came in and she talked about, her role as a canine handler. But she also talked to a lot of the ladies saying, look, being a female officer is a little bit different. Becoming a female canine handler was a little bit different. And she talked about her life as she, went through the academy, became an officer, got out on the street, and then eventually got into the canine and all the training that goes in with the dog. She talked about how the department procures a dog. We spent about $10,000 on the animal. Then she's got to spend about 6 months training with the animal in San Antonio and Austin. And then, we talked about the laws, about using when you can and can't use a canine, how a dog, when they get a scent or what we call a hit on a vehicle or a person, the admissibility of it in court, as well as search and seizure laws. So having her there was great. That student right there did not get bit, for the record. He was playing with the dog. The dog was very friendly. But we had a good time. She came in and did an outstanding job. And like I said, she's a current UT Tyler student. She should graduate in about another 1.5 years on her bachelor's, and she's already talking about getting her master's degree. Next, I brought in the Smith County Child Advocacy Center. We talked this week, that particular group, we were talking about crimes against children. And one of the aspects was forensic interviewing, how you talk to a child who was either the victim of a crime or witnessed a crime of violence inside the home. The unique thing about this, after the presentation, 10 of my students, after seeing this presentation, signed up to volunteer and or work for the Smith County CAC in the volunteer capacity or as an internship. 7 right now are in the stages of getting their assignments. They're going to work 10, 15, 20 hours a week. Some of it's non-pay, some of it's pay. But bringing them out here, they actually did their demonstration, their presentation on how they talk to children who have been victims of neglect, physical abuse, sexual abuse, the process it takes to become a forensic interviewer with the state of Texas, the training they received. And we covered a lot of bases. We had several cases that we talked about. We had several cases where they had some success, and several cases that, the child would not disclose any information. We discussed their role as being able to testify in court as an expert witness and some of the things that they're asked on the stand. We discussed confidentiality, and a lot of it was just, being able to keep their sanity. There's a high turnover rate with forensic interviewing because, when you think about it, those 2 ladies, they hear, child abuse cases, 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, sometimes more. They have to get out in the middle of the night to do an interview, depending on the circumstances. So they were just basically discussing the reality of their job. And they basically answered a lot of questions and had a lot of good information to give. But the students that were really wanting to work child abuse investigations got to see the other side of what happens beyond the initial police, first responder, detective investigation, how these ladies and these components actually help strengthen our cases when we go to court. Then we were, then we were just getting into domestic minor sex trafficking. This was a topic that I've worked on a lot as a police officer. And there's a nonprofit in Tyler called For the Silent, and it's run by Kenny and Julie Rigsby. Julie couldn't make it to class this day, but Kenny came in, and I've worked with Kenny before in the past, and he basically discussed what human trafficking is and the types of human trafficking and the 2 forms of human trafficking they deal with. And I gave him the whole hour. He usually has an 8 to 12 hour presentation, and he kind of gave us the Cliff Notes version of what they do. But what was interesting was he wasn't talking about human trafficking on the national or international scale. He was talking about human trafficking cases that he's working right now in Smith and Gregg County. As it stands, he's got about 82 cases that he and his wife have worked personally and assisted with police police officers and agents with the FBI and DEA and Border Patrol. And what they do is they go out and help identify potential victims of trafficking. And when they talk about domestic minor sex trafficking, he emphasized the word domestic. And what he was talking about is this was local sex trafficking. This was not victims coming over the border or being flown in, or anything from the movie Taken or anything like that. These were people that were being forced into sexual prostitution out of their homes, out of their schools, by their boyfriends, relatives, and so forth. And their job is to help victims identify and get them out of this lifestyle. So he had a lot to say. He and I are actually working on some research projects right now and grant proposals to get them some more money with the federal government. But we actually had a lot of questions about human trafficking, and he was actually able to debunk a lot of myths about what people see on TV and movies about human trafficking. And when he brings it closer to home and showed the stats and showed the areas of the region where there were working students, working with victims and all that, a lot of these students just couldn't believe it. They were like, "Oh my gosh, that's down the road from my school," or I know where that is, and all that. So it was kind of an eye opener, and it was a really good presentation. I hope to bring him back later on in the future. And then I had a couple people that were interested in being nurses, specifically sexual assault nurses. And fortunately, Nanette Pereiras, she's the SANE coordinator at Good Shepherd Medical Center. She's a dear friend of mine. She and I go on the road a lot and train officers and advocates during the summer and winter breaks. She was able to break away from her schedule in Longview and come out to Tyler. And she basically explained what a SANE program was, what she does. And this is when we were talking about adult victims and child victims of sexual assault. But when we bring them to the hospital, her role is to basically collect forensic evidence. She does an interview with the victim. They do what they call the head-to-toe examination, where they look for trauma. And then they basically go and they look for fluids. They look for trace evidence. They look for evidence that's crossed, depending on the type of contact that the victim's reporting. And she kind of, in great detail, explained what goes into a SANE kit, and that's the little white box there on the table. A SANE kit's basically what we call a sexual assault nurse examiner kit. That's where we put all of our evidence. We put it in a refrigerator, then we send it to DPS, and then when it comes time to court or to testify, that kit's activated and opened up, and we take all the evidence and drawings and everything out, and she presents it in court. She's got about 20 years of experience in this. She's just a phenomenal presenter and just a wealth of knowledge. So I was real fortunate to have her come in and do her presentation. After the break, I think we had spring break. We came back, and I had about 6 students that were taking the civil service exam with the city of Tyler. Now, their civil service exam is scheduled for June 4th of this year. And they had to get their applications and get everything in by the 1st of May, I think, was the deadline, so they could get on the list. And a lot of these guys came to me during my office hours and after class, wanted me to look at their application. They had questions. So I was real lucky to get Detective Reggie Conley out to just basically, come in. And I said, look, this is your hour. Talk to them about, what you're looking for as a recruiter. He handles the recruiting and hiring for the city of Tyler. And talk to him about civil service exams, and he did. We covered everything. He did give everyone some swag, which is really cool. He had those cups full of pens and cards and all that. Free publicity for the city of Tyler, which he loved. And, I'm always looking to get new cups, and, students love having stuff in their hands, so that was great. But he got there and opened up with the civil service exam, what they need to hire. And he explained the difference between at-will and civil service to our students. I had a lot of guys that wanted to be cops. And then he talked about the application and why it was so lengthy. I said, look, we're giving you a badge and a gun. We're giving you arrest powers. We have to make sure that we're hiring the right people, and that means we have to check your backgrounds and we have to go deep into your life. And he explained the importance of being honest on your applications. He said, look, if you've had stupid decisions and you've experimented with drugs and you've done dumb stuff, tell us about it, because if we know about it up front, we know you're being honest with us. That will greatly increase your chances of being hired, as opposed to hiding something and then finding it and becoming automatically disqualified. Then he discussed the process of being polygraphed, and the polygraph basically works off the application. They want to check the reliability of your answers. And then he explained the background checks that take about 6 months. And then if everything looks good there, then we assign them to a police academy in Tyler. It's at the Tyler Junior College Academy on the West Loop. And he talks about the 19 weeks, what to expect, covering the penal code, the family code, the code of criminal procedure, criminal investigations, driving the cars, going to the firing range and doing all the fun stuff. And, then preparing for the state exam to get your license. And then after that, he kind of spent the rest of the class talking about the careers, not just a Tyler police officer, but a police officer in general. Your first year out, you're in training. Second year, you're by yourself, but you're still kind of being watched. Then after your second year, choices and opportunities opened up. I mean, most departments right now after year 2 will let officers who so desire to join the SWAT team or hostage negotiation or become a canine handler or go become a detective, And he really says sky's the limit. It's those students that have self-initiation and that are motivated. They get those spots. They go out there and they're hardworking every day. They've got a strong work ethic. They're dependable. And he really talked about those core values to my students, saying, look, we're not going to hire just anyone and put them on the street. We want go-getters. We want people that we can trust and that are reliable and that are going to, basically have that servant's heart first to serve the public and the community. So he did a great presentation on that. There was a lot of information he gave. And Reggie said he's one of those people who will come back anytime. He just loves coming to UT Tyler and really just wants to get out there and explain law enforcement and try to draw in some applicants as well. So it's kind of a win-win for both of us. Then I was able to nail down Josh Petrie. He was a special agent with the alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. What was great about having Josh in is that he's also a former UT Tyler graduate. And when he was in he was a student here. He was actually working for the University of Police, the UT Tyler University Police Department. He was a police officer for about 4 years before he got on with ATF. And what Josh did was he basically started out explaining ATF. And his presentation, he broke down the 12 things according to the U.S. Code. I think it's Section 281 of what the ATF does. How they go after alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. And he really says our job now, post 9/11, is firearms. They look for people who shouldn't have guns. I had a bunch of cowboys in my class that were worried about guns and Second Amendments. He goes, no, I'm not taking your guns. No, I don't know how many guns you have. No, I don't care. He says, we're looking for bad guys with guns. And how he works on task force and how they try to do narcotics interdictions, but their job is to get the guns off the streets. But then he went back and explained, when he was here that he got his bachelor's degree from UT Tyler. He explained the classes he had, and he was very personable with the students. He was explaining, I had your class, I had this professor. Yeah, I remember doing this project. Then he got on with it as a university police department officer and then stuck around and got his master's in public administration. And he discussed how that opened doors for him with the ATF. So he, after that, he explained, going to the ATF, applying with the ATF, the interview process, having to go to Quantico, then go to the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center in Glencoe, Georgia. And then he talked about, he's moved around a little bit. He said, how and the students are real concerned, how do I get back to East Texas if that's where I want to go? And he said, well, your first assignment is really a drop of the hat. You decide, you don't get to decide where you go, but you do a year or two there. And if there's an opening in your town, then, you can request to come back. And then if there's somebody that just like in his situation, he was in Oklahoma, there was a guy in Tyler. This guy wanted to move back to Oklahoma, and Josh wanted to move back to Tyler. So they just switched assignments, filled out some paperwork, and he was back in a month. So a lot of these students had good questions, and a lot of these students were very impressed with the ATF and really didn't understand what the ATF did. So that was a fantastic presentation. And then I brought in Mark Bennett from the Tyler office. He's a special investigator with Child Protective Services. He came in on a Friday and basically broke down some of the major cases he's had with dealing with neglect, child abuse. He brought in some physical abuse. We discussed some cases. He brought in some crime scene photos and really just kind of laid out what CPS does, why he loves it. He was a former cop out in, I think it was in Dallas or somewhere, but he said, I started working with CPS and he realized that his heart was to help children at the civil level, getting them out of the bad situation, getting parents, into the system, trying to make parents better, or finding children foster care or adoption agencies. So he's been doing this for a long time. He enjoyed his work as an agent. But I had two students, as I mentioned earlier, that were very interested in becoming or working with CPS. One had just finished her internship, and he said, with an internship, you've got your foot in the door. So just keep plugging away, and he talked to both of them after class about the application process, the interview process, But, he said, we're working with law enforcement. We have to train with them every year. And, we answer to the state, and we go to court, and we testify, and we remove kids, and police come with us. And when police can't remove a kid, well, we have more latitude, so we can do it. So he explained the importance of working jointly with local law enforcement. And he did a fantastic job. He had a lot of information. This day, he had too much information because he was dangerously close to running to like 20 minutes past the class. And I knew some of them had another class, but these kids weren't moving. They really enjoyed what Agent Bennett had to say. And he gave us out some information and discussed some stats of how prevalent child abuse is in the state of Texas. And he broke it down by counties. And I think it woke up a lot of students that, we do have problems out here dealing with child abuse. So he did a great job overall. Then I brought in Chad Esch. He is the resident agent in charge with the U.S. Drug Enforcement Agency, DEA. I had several students that want to join DEA, didn't quite know what DEA was. He brought in a recruiting video that lasted about 5 minutes, and then he brought in photos of the cases he's worked. What's great about Chad is he is from Texas, but he has spent his 20-year career overseas. Very seldom. I think he's been in the U.S. 2 years total during his 25-year career with the DEA. He's been in Hong Kong. He's been in the Philippines. He's been in India. He's been in the Middle East, and he just loves working. He speaks like 2 languages now. He's doing great. In fact, next month, he's going back to Hong Kong to run the agency there, the office in the Hong Kong office out there. So he had just an incredible amount of knowledge, an incredible amount of experience to talk about. And what was cool about him is you see the hats right there on the left. He was asking students DEA questions. And every time a student got one right, he'd just throw a hat to them, just throwing out some swag. And that kind of generated a lot of competition in the class. And a lot of students were throwing out answers because everyone wanted a DEA hat or a challenge coin or something. So it worked out great. He came in and discussed the mission of the DEA, what they do, and more importantly, right now for these students, how to apply the skills and they're looking for with new applicants, right out of college, some with experience, some without experience. There's different divisions in the DEA that students can apply for. There's internships. And he was very open and candid about the application process. And he was very open and candid about, internships. So you get an internship, you pretty much can get a job with DEA if you do a good job. And, and he really stressed the importance of networking with agents and getting to know people. So that was very beneficial. And then the following week, Chris Swift and Brad Clark came in from Texas Parks and Wildlife. They are 2 friends of mine that work in Smith County. Chris has been in, I think, 7 or 8 years. Brad's been in about 6 years. They basically work for a captain that's assigned to this region. Long story short with these guys is that they started out in East Texas. I think Brad went to UT Tyler for a while. I know he went to TJC. And they basically talked about what they do with Texas Parks and Wildlife. And a lot of people didn't understand that, besides catching poachers and hunters and hunting out of season, they work all the lakes and rivers in the state of Texas. They work drug interdiction. They work a lot of the licensing and gaming and tagging laws for Texas. But they're also Texas police officers or peace officers. They have to go to an academy. They have to take the state exam. And, the badges they wear, their jurisdiction is the state of Texas. What they did was they actually invited the students to come out with them and do what we call ride-alongs. And that means, you ride along in the truck with them, you ride around when they're on the lake doing lake patrol, you can get on the boat with them during, non-peak hours, but spend time getting to know these guys and ride around and ask questions and see what these guys do. And I think about 7 or 8 of them signed up for it. And I think one of them's already gone out with, I think it was Chris or Brad. I think it was Brad they went out with last week. But long story short, they also talked about the importance of applying early with Parks and Wildlife. And they said, look, we get thousands of applicants from all around the world, not just Texas, that want to work for us. And typically it takes 2 or 3 times of applying and being denied before you get in. And then there's like a 19-week academy in Austin they have to go to. And then after that, they get to pick the region and do what they want to do. So there was a lot of good questions. And I think there's a lot of people that are now interested in Parks and Wildlife that never thought about it until these guys came in and explained everything. So I was real appreciative for that. Last but not least, my good friend, Special Agent Brent Chambers came in from the FBI, Federal Bureau of Investigation, Tyler Field Office. He's just down the road from us. I've worked with Brent before in the past on cases when I was a police sergeant with Longview. Brent actually has 10 months to go, and then he's going to retire, and I am trying to rope him in to become an adjunct professor here at UT. And he's very excited about that possibility. But he came in, and I think that was it was a Friday where I think everyone came into class, including my 2 other classes. I said, look, y'all want to be FBI agents? Come sit in my class, get to know Brent. So I had people from my night class, and I had people from my other course that I'm teaching sit in on his lecture. And he came in. He's a very quiet, humble guy, but he's been in the FBI about 30 years. And he started out as a local cop, then became the mayor of a small town out in central West Texas. And then he joined the FBI. And he was talking about how the FBI is constantly changing. And he talks about, what the way it was yesterday will not be the way it is tomorrow. Policies change, missions change. But he said what he loves about the FBI is that change is constant. And Brent's background was he was in evidence and body recovery. So he was at 9/11 Ground Zero, helping with the debris and recovering victims of that attack. He goes off to Somalia. He's been off to the Balkans. He's worked bank robberies, kidnapping cases. His big thing now is kidnapping. When it's a legitimate federal kidnapping case, he works those. But he spent a good deal of time talking about what the FBI is looking for today, not what's on television, not what's on the movies. And during this week, we were talking about cyber crimes, and we were talking about other things that the FBI would touch. And he talked about, the 5 ways you can get into the FBI right now, right out of college, is you've got some military experience, you've got some law enforcement experience, or you have a degree that they're seeking, general knowledge, like accounting, computer science, business. You have foreign language experience, or you have someone in the FBI, and they can just kind of push your application away that you want to be a specialty like hostage rescue team or something like that, and you've got previous experience. So we talked about, the first thing to do is go to the website and download the 100-page application. He talked about the importance of, why we have it, that, they have to send agents out to check your background. If you've been out of the country, they have to send an agent to that consulate or that hotel to make sure you were doing, even if you're on vacation, they send agents out and they do a thorough background check. And the reason they do that is because you're going to get top secret security clearance. So they have to say, we got to know who we're giving security clearance to. After the application, you come in and you do your first set of interviews, and you do a polygraph, you do a drug screen. If that works out great, you do a second set of interviews. They do a home visit with your spouse if you're married, and explain, they do what they call a spousal interview. And then if everything works out, you go to Quantico, for about 6 months, and you train to become an agent. And during that time, they show you, the federal laws, different types of investigations, and then you're assigned to a field office somewhere in the U.S. And the big question for all the students was, well, when can I come back to Texas? And he says, about 2 years, 3 years. You go out, do a great job, and then as soon as after your 2 years of probation, then as soon as the opening happens, you can apply to come back to Texas and go to the Dallas office, the Tyler field office, or Houston or Austin, and you can work your way back, and you can spend your whole career working whatever it is you want to work for. So he had a lot of good information. He again showed a basic recruiting video for the FBI, and then he talked about his own personal experiences, what he's doing, how he's working. The big thing now he's working is virtual kidnappings, which tied in very well with our cyber crimes class, because virtual kidnappings are people that get online and steal someone's cell phones and then convince family members while they're on vacation that they've been kidnapped and they need to pay ransom money. And meanwhile, the supposed victims have no idea what's going on. They just lost their cell phone, so they're enjoying their vacation, and they're having money wired to the kidnappers through Western Union or something, which is virtually untraceable. But he says they're working that right now, and they're working terrorism cases and stuff like that. So his job's never boring, and there was a lot of great questions from the students and interaction. 2 of the students right now are on USA Jobs trying to set up the internships for the fall and for the spring. So this put a lot of motivation on my students, which was good. That's what I was shooting for. So after bringing these guys in, these were the results of my speakers. Number one, it provided network opportunity. Everyone that came in gave out business cards. They encouraged the students to contact them, do ride-alongs, put in for internships. A lot of these students learning experience of how to apply and to apply early with these jobs, basically saying, look, we're not going to come to you. You've got to come to us. You've got to apply for these jobs, and you've got to have your ducks in a row and be ready to be competitive, because all these jobs are very competitive. Grades and other attributes matter. All these guys push their grades. They said, look, we don't want CD students. We want B's and A's. We want to see what you're doing besides going to school. Are you giving back to the community? Are you involved in, you know, nonprofit organizations? Are you doing like services or communities projects like soup kitchens, reading, you know, to kids and all that, doing something else besides just going to class? So they put that in there. And then they had the opportunity to connect with, I think this is very important, connecting with former UT Tyler graduates that are already in the field. You know, they got to meet people who were here at one time and then pursued their passions, or, you know, took one job to get them to their dream job. And they got to see that, you know, those jobs are obtainable, that you can do it, you know, and you just have to meet someone that's there that has sat in the classroom and moved on. And that is an FBI agent or ATF or DPS or something like that. So I think that was very important, was finding, you know, luckily finding several UT Tyler students or graduates that were able to come in and kind of bring that epiphany to the students. And then again, tying in real life experience to the course for more relevance. Like I said, each week I tried to successfully bring a speaker in that was relevant to what we were talking about, and then just giving them carte blanche to talk, and then tie things in saying, look, narcotics, this is what we do. And then using those terms and those investigative techniques, you know, we're not just talking about in the textbook. I'm not just lecturing, but it's actual real, and they could see the end result with someone that's actually doing it on a day-to-day operation. So how are we going to do this? Well, I'm lucky because I've got a lot of contacts here in East Texas, but I would recommend, and I had to do this, start calling and setting up speakers early before the semester begins. Don't be doing it like a week before, especially people that are working and they're professionals. Things come up. You know, I had one guy that had to cancel twice. Okay, fine. I couldn't get mad at him. I mean, he had to testify in court, then he had to go away for training. So I had to be flexible with their schedules. Always have a plan B in the case of cancellation or change, meaning that if, you know, it's 10 minutes before and then you get a phone call or the guy forgets, you know, okay, well, I've got a lecture or I've got something to go on, no problem. I would just pretend, you know, that until they showed up that I was going to lecture, and when they showed up, boom, give them the class, and I'd be good with that. Attempt to link your speaker with the course material at the time, or brief your speaker of what you're discussing with that week. A lot of these guys are saying, well, what are y'all talking about? I would give them the lesson plan, and they would work their, you know, they would work their lecture in around questions and try to work in a lot of the goals and objectives for that week. Now, somebody asked me, what happens if, you know, the speaker I want's in New York or New Zealand or something like that, or in Europe, you know, whether you're teaching English, history, political science, geography or something, make contact with them. And, you know, most universities have Zoom or Skype capabilities. Zoom or Skype them in, you know, let them, you know, if you've got the interaction television or you can set up a computer, you can still bring your speaker in. You know, they just won't be there physically. You just bring them in virtually, and then you let them do their presentation, much like I'm doing with you today. And then you can have the students interact by asking questions at the end of the presentation, but you're still letting people talk to someone that's already set up in their field. Okay, now I'm going to take some questions if there's any. Get out of this. All right, got to find Holly now. All right, Holly, where are you?
You will need to get back into the Google Hangout and then stop sharing.
Okay, there I am. Okay.
Awesome. There you are.
Okay.
So there's about two questions, I guess, so far.
Okay.
What is the best advice? So you have, you know, did you just start reaching out to these people, or did you already know them previously? I know some of them were UT Tyler students, but what might be the best advice if you don't already have these partnerships? Do you let them know, kind of give them an incentive for what they're contributing to the class? You know, how do you really develop this partnership to get these?
A lot. That's a good question. Some of them I knew. Some of them like DEA, I didn't know them really at all. So a lot of it was just cold calling. I would just call up there, introduce myself, tell them what I'm doing, what I'm thinking about doing. And I would talk to the supervisor or manager. Then they would basically, it's what we call a voluntold. They would volunteer someone to call me, and we'd set up a time. And then I would have time with them on the phone to kind of prep them before they would come to class. And then from there, now I'm building a network, because all 12, 15 of those folks, they all want to come back. So a lot of it is just, you know, figuring out the lesson plan first, what you want to do for that semester, then going back and plugging in your speakers. after your lesson plan or after your course outline's made, and just cold calling them. And then of course etiquette, you want to send them a thank you note. With Trooper Blackwell, he's a brand new trooper, so I wrote a letter to his supervisor thanking him and the professionalism. And his annual evaluation was getting pretty close to the due date, so this letter actually helped him a lot. And I didn't know that until after the fact. But I'm always, please, thank yous, and sending emails out.
Awesome. How frequently did you have guest speakers into your class within one semester?
This semester I lucked out because I was teaching this particular class on Monday, Wednesday, Fridays. So Fridays worked for all my guest speakers. So just about every Friday I would bring someone in, except the DEA, they had a conflict, so they came in on a Monday. So I would just move my schedule around a little bit, and we would lecture towards the end of the week. But I would be sure to get everyone there, the lesson plan going on Monday and Wednesday, and then reserve it for the speaker on Friday.
Great. One more question for you.
Okay.
Regarding your students, did you give them guidelines or a rubric before you had speakers visit your class so that they knew, how to prepare and how to contribute to the discussion?
I would do two things. I would tell them a week before who was coming in the following Friday, and I would put an announcement on the Blackboard because we did all of our coursework on Blackboard. I would give them an announcement of who was coming and when, and to start thinking about questions. And a lot of the reason I brought these particular speakers in is because those were the areas my students responded to that they wanted to talk about. So it worked out really well that they wanted to talk to some of them want to go FBI, some of them want to be game wardens, some want to be nurses. So I was able to tailor my my guest speakers to meet their needs. But then I had a bunch that were just kind of undecided about everything. So I was actually throwing more information out at them and hopefully generating some interest in particular areas.
Great. Well, Scott, that is David. That is all of the questions that have come through. So if you have any last comments, then we'll wrap it up.
I think in conclusion, guys, have fun with this. Like I said, find guest speakers that are relevant. Generate your own network of people you can bring in. Like you said, sometimes I've got people that are out of town. They may have to Skype or Zoom in, so you got to be flexible with it. But I think the more speakers you can bring into a classroom, I think it makes the class more interesting, obviously. But it also, with these seniors that have no idea what they want to do and they have no idea how to apply or have a resume, having someone tell them what they need to do or start thinking about kind of puts them on the path to success, which is something I think we're all aiming for with our students.
Thank you so much.
All right. Well, guys, thank you all, and y'all have a great weekend.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. This concludes our live broadcast. If you have any questions, please feel free to email either myself or Dr. Scott, and we'll get back to you. Just on a completely side note, if you're interested in doing a live broadcast, we're using Google Hangout, so we got to give a shout out to Google. And just thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Have a great afternoon.
Bye.